In August of 2011, in a rural county outside Reno, Nevada, a woman named Laura set up a folding table at a farm swap and sold 12 jars of home-canned peach preserves for $4 apiece. By the end of the week, she had a letter from the county health department and a $500 fine. The jars had been sealed in a water bath the same way her grandmother sealed them in 1943. Same lids, same recipe, same sugar ratio, same result. The preserves were fine. The paperwork was not. Nobody got sick. Nobody complained. A health inspector saw the table and wrote the ticket. The fine was not for making bad food. The fine was for making food without a commercial kitchen license, a certified food handler's card, and a label printed with nutritional information in a format approved by the Food and Drug Administration. She canned peaches the way her grandmother canned peaches, and a man in a county truck told her it was illegal. If you clicked on this video, you already know that most of what your grandparents did with food in their own kitchens would get them a visit from a health inspector in most American counties today. What you probably do not know is how many of those methods still work. Not just work, outperform. Not just outperform, outlast every product on the shelf of every grocery store in this country by months, sometimes years. And nobody in a suit wants you to know that, because the entire processed food supply chain was built on you forgetting what your grandmother could do with salt, vinegar, lard, and a cool, dark shelf. Here is the twist. Not one of these 25 methods is actually illegal for personal home use in any state I can find on the books. Not one. But they will call them illegal. They will call them unsafe. They will call them outdated. And they will fine you if you try to sell what you make with them, trade what you make with them, or in some counties, even give them away to a neighbor. Because the labels are not about safety. The labels are about jurisdiction. Now, number 9 on this list will get you a citation in 14 states if you sell the result at a farmer's market without a license. Number 4. The FDA published a consumer warning against it in 2012, even though your grandmother did it every single week of her life. And number 1, friend, number 1 is the one they spent the most money making sure you would never try. And I am not touching it until we are most of the way down. I am Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge. The Mercers have held this stretch of Appalachian mountain since the 1790s, and I have not left it. My grandfather Eli raised me after my daddy died in the timber, and before he went, he made me copy every last thing he knew into a leather journal. This is me keeping that promise. Before we get into the pantry, pull the trigger on subscribe. Not for me. Because the buried skills we drag back into daylight around here, you are going to want the next one. We are going all 25. Top to bottom. The ones they told you to forget. The ones that still work. The ones your grandmother did not need a license to do in her own kitchen. Number 25. Save your cooking grease in a tin by the stove. Your grandmother kept a metal can on the back of her stove and poured every drop of bacon, fat, ham drippings, and roast grease into it. She fried eggs in it Monday. She greased the cornbread pan Wednesday. She made gravy Friday. That tin was worth more to her than anything you could buy in a plastic bottle at the store. Animal fat does not go rancid the way seed oils do. Strained and kept in a cool pantry, cooking grease lasts months. A $7 bottle of avocado oil lasts you 3 weeks. Your grandmother's grease tin lasted her until the next hog, and it cost her nothing. Number 24. Water glass eggs. Your great-grandmother mixed 1 ounce of sodium silicate, which is water glass, into 1 quart of boiled and cooled water. She lowered fresh, unwashed eggs into the solution in a stoneware crock. The water glass sealed the pores of the shell. Those eggs lasted 6 months to a year on a cellar shelf without refrigeration. The USDA does not recommend this method. Your great-grandmother did not need the Uzda's recommendation. She needed eggs in February, when the hens stopped laying. Number 23. Root cellar storage. Your grandfather dug a room into the north side of a hill, shored it with timbers, laid a plank floor, and stored 2,000 pounds of potatoes, carrots, turnips, beets, cabbages, and apples through 5 months of winter without electricity. The temperature in a properly built root cellar stays between 32 and 40 degrees year-round. The humidity stays between 85 and 95%. That is the exact range a modern commercial cold storage facility maintains, and your grandfather built the same thing with a shovel. United States Department of Agriculture Farmers Bulletin 879 from 1917 describes root cellar construction in detail. The government once taught this skill. Then the refrigerator companies showed up, and the government stopped teaching it. Number 22. Sand storage for root vegetables. Your grandmother filled a wooden crate with damp sand and buried carrots, beets, and parsnips in layers, root end down, not touching each other. The sand held moisture against the skin, so they did not shrivel. It held cool temperature, so they did not sprout. In a root cellar or an unheated garage, those vegetables lasted 4 to 5 months. A bag of carrots from the grocery store lasts 2 weeks in your refrigerator. Your grandmother's sand-packed carrots lasted until April and cost her a box of free sand. Number 21. Salt-curing pork without nitrates. Your great-grandfather rubbed coarse salt into pork by hand, packed it in a barrel, and cured it for weeks. No sodium nitrite, no sodium nitrate, no pink curing salt, pure sodium chloride and thyme. The Uzda requires commercial cured meat to contain nitrates or nitrites for bacterial safety. Your great-grandfather's barrel did not have a label. His family ate from it all winter, and his grandchildren were alive to tell the story. Number 20. Lard-sealed cooked meat. Your grandmother cooked pork or chicken until it was falling off the bone. She packed the shredded meat tight into a stoneware crock. Then she poured hot rendered lard over the top until it sealed the surface with a thick white cap. When the lard hardened, no air reached the meat. No bacteria could penetrate. She set that crock on the cellar shelf and pulled from it for 2 to 3 months. The French call this confit. Your grandmother called it Tuesday. Number 19. Air-dried jerky without a dehydrator. Your great-grandfather sliced lean meat thin against the grain, salted it heavy, and hung the strips on a wooden rack in dry shade with good airflow. In 3 to 5 days, the meat was dry, hard, and shelf-stable for months. No electricity, no plastic trays, no $200 machine. The Uzda recommends heating jerky to 160 degrees before drying to kill surface bacteria. Your great-grandfather had no thermometer. He had salt, air, and 400 years of the method working. A commercial beef jerky bag runs $8 for 3 ounces. Your great-grandfather's rack held 20 pounds and cost him an afternoon. Number 18. Open crock vinegar pickling. Your grandmother packed cucumbers, green beans, peppers, and okra into stoneware crocks with a brine of vinegar, salt, and water. She weighted them down with a plate and a stone. No boiling water bath, no pressure canner, no sealed lids. The acidity of the vinegar dropped the pH below 4.6, which is the threshold below which botulism cannot grow. She did not know the number. She knew the taste. If it was sharp enough to make her eyes water, it was safe enough to feed her family. Number 17. Burying cabbage in straw-lined pits. Your grandfather dug a trench in the garden, lined it with straw, set whole cabbage heads upside down in a row, and covered them with more straw and a mound of earth. Those cabbages kept through the winter and into early spring. The earth held the temperature steady. The straw insulated against freeze. The inverted position drained moisture, so the heads did not rot from the core. A head of cabbage from the grocery store lasts 2 weeks. Your grandfather's buried cabbages lasted 4 months, and he never opened a refrigerator door. Number 16. Waxing cheese for shelf storage. Your grandmother made a wheel of hard cheese, let it dry until the rind formed, then dipped it in melted beeswax or paraffin until the entire surface was sealed. That wax coat stopped mold, stopped moisture loss, and stopped air from reaching the cheese. She hung the waxed wheel in the cellar and aged it for 6 months to 2 years. No refrigeration, no plastic wrap, no vacuum seal. The wax did it all. A block of aged cheddar at the store runs $8 to $14 per pound. Your grandmother's waxed wheel cost her a gallon of milk, a tablespoon of rennet, and a candle's worth of wax. Number 15. Smoking meat in a home-built smokehouse. Your great-grandfather built a small shed, ran a pipe from a fire pit dug 10 feet away, and cold-smoked hams, shoulders and sausages for days at temperatures below 90 degrees. The smoke deposited antimicrobial compounds on the meat surface. Combined with the salt cure, the smoked meat hung in the shed for months without refrigeration. In most states, you can smoke your own meat for personal consumption. The moment you sell it, you need a USDA-inspected facility. Your great-grandfather's smokehouse fed his family for 40 years. The inspection requirement was written in 1906. His smokehouse was built in 1870. Pattern break, friend. Everything so far. Most homesteaders have heard of at least a few of these, but we are about to cross into the ones that will make a health inspector sweat. The ones your grandmother did every week that nobody in a county office wants to talk about. And the one I am holding for last is the one they spent the most money making sure your family would never try again. Number 14. Storing grain and flour with bay leaves. Your grandmother tucked dried bay leaves into her flour bin, her cornmeal sack, her rice container, and her dried bean jars. The volatile oils in bay leaves are a natural insect repellent. Weevils and grain moths will not lay eggs in a container with bay leaves present. No plastic bags, no oxygen absorbers, no mylar pouches. A $3 packet of bay leaves protected a winter's worth of grain for free. Number 13. Fermented sauerkraut in open crocks. Your grandmother shredded cabbage, packed it in a stoneware crock with salt, weighted it down, and let it ferment at room temperature for 3 to 6 weeks. The lactobacillus bacteria on the cabbage leaves converted the sugars into lactic acid, dropping the pH and preserving the cabbage for months. She did not call it probiotics, she called it kraut, and it kept her family's digestion running through every winter when fresh vegetables did not exist. The fermented food aisle at the health food store charges you $9 for a jar of what your grandmother made by the gallon for the cost of a cabbage and a tablespoon of salt. Number 12. Spring house cooling. Before your great-grandfather owned a refrigerator, he built a small stone shed over the coldest spring on his land. Water flowed through a stone trough inside, and crocks of milk, butter, cream and cheese sat in that trough day and night. The spring water held a steady temperature between 45 and 55 degrees year-round. They regulated the pipe it came out of. They metered the water it ran through. They did not outlaw the spring house. They just made sure the electric refrigerator was cheaper to buy on credit than a stone shed was to build. Number 11. Honey-preserved fruit. Your grandmother packed whole berries, sliced peaches, and halved pears into jars and covered them completely with raw honey. Honey is naturally antimicrobial. Its low moisture content, low pH, and hydrogen peroxide production prevent bacterial growth. Fruit preserved in honey lasts a year or longer at room temperature. No canning, no boiling, no processing, no lids, just honey and a jar. Ancient Egyptians preserved food in honey 4,000 years ago. The chemistry has not changed. The grocery store would rather sell you a $5 can of fruit cocktail in corn syrup. Number 10. Potting cooked beans under lard. Your grandmother cooked a massive batch of beans, seasoned them heavy, packed them into crocks while hot, and sealed the top with a 2-inch layer of rendered lard. The fat cap hardened and sealed out the air. She pulled from those crocks for weeks. Reheated portions, spooned out what she needed, and smoothed the lard back over the top. A can of beans from the store costs $1.50 and lasts 2 years on a shelf. Your grandmother's bean crock cost her a pound of dried beans and a spoonful of lard, lasted a month, and tasted like a meal somebody loved you enough to cook from scratch. Number 9. Unlicensed butter making and storage. Your grandmother skimmed cream off the top of raw milk, let it ripen for a day, and churned it into butter with a wooden paddle and a clay churn. She packed the butter into a stoneware crock, pressed it down to eliminate air pockets, and poured a layer of brine over the top. The salt brine sealed the surface and prevented rancidity. That butter lasted months in the cellar. In 14 states, selling raw butter at a farmer's market without a dairy license will get you a citation. Your grandmother did not sell it. She ate it, and she never asked permission from a licensing board to feed her own family. Number 8. Dry salt fish without refrigeration. Your great-grandfather filleted fish, rubbed them thick with coarse salt, and stacked them on a drying rack in the shade. Over 5 to 7 days, the salt drew the moisture out, and the fillets hardened into a shelf-stable protein that lasted months. Soak in fresh water overnight before cooking. Cod, perch, catfish, any lean white fish works. The Atlantic salt cod trade fed half of Europe for 400 years. Your great-grandfather ran the same process on a creek bank with a pocket knife and a bag of salt. Number 7. Ash-preserved eggs. Your great-grandmother filled a wooden box with fine hardwood ash and buried fresh, unwashed eggs in it, completely covered. The ash blocked air and moisture from reaching the shell. Those eggs lasted 3 to 6 months without refrigeration. It is the oldest egg preservation technique documented in the Americas. A dozen eggs from the store costs $4 and lasts 3 weeks in a refrigerator. Your grandmother's ash box held 5 dozen and lasted until spring. Number 6. Sun-dried corn on the cob. Your grandmother pulled ears of corn at full maturity, peeled back the husk but left it attached, and hung the ears from the porch rafters or a barn beam in full sun and wind. In 2 to 3 weeks, the kernels were stone dry. She twisted them off the cob and stored them in cloth sacks in the pantry, ground into cornmeal as needed. That corn lasted a year or longer. No freezer bags, no vacuum sealer, no electricity. The Haudenosaunee and dozens of other native peoples dried corn this way for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. Your grandmother learned it from the land and the people who came before her. Number 5. Rendering and storing tallow. Your great-grandfather took the hard fat from around the kidneys and loins of a cow or a deer, chopped it fine, and rendered it in a cast-iron pot over low heat until the fat melted clear and the cracklings floated to the surface. He strained the liquid fat into jars and let it cool to a hard white block. Tallow lasts a year or more at room temperature. He used it for cooking, for sealing crocks, for making candles, for waterproofing leather, and for preserving cooked meat. A 12-ounce jar of grass-fed tallow from the health food store runs $15 to $25. Your great-grandfather rendered a gallon from a single cow, and it lasted him a year. Number 4. Raw apple cider vinegar with the mother. Your grandmother pressed apples in the fall, let the juice ferment into hard cider, then let the hard cider sit in an open crock covered with cheesecloth until a thick, rubbery disc formed on the surface. That disc is the mother. The living colony of acetic acid bacteria that turns alcohol into vinegar. She never bought vinegar. She grew it. Year after year, the same mother, fed with fresh cider every fall, producing gallon after gallon of vinegar she used for pickling, cleaning, cooking, and preserving. The FDA published a consumer advisory in 2012 cautioning against unpasteurized vinegar. Your grandmother's mother colony was unpasteurized by definition. It was also alive, active, and producing vinegar for 30 years in the same crock on the same shelf. Number 3. Clabbered raw milk. Your grandmother set a jar of fresh raw milk on the counter, covered it with a cloth, and left it for 24 to 48 hours. The naturally present lactobacillus bacteria fermented the milk sugars, thickened the milk into a tangy, yogurt-like food, and produced lactic acid that preserved it for days beyond what fresh milk would last. She ate clabber with cornbread. She used the whey for baking. She fed the rest to the hogs. The sale of raw milk is restricted or banned entirely in 20 states. Your grandmother did not buy hers from a store. She walked to the barn. And the jar on the counter was not a health violation. It was breakfast. Number 2. Saving, swapping, and replanting your own seed. Your grandmother saved the seeds from her best tomatoes, her strongest beans, her heaviest squash. She dried them, labeled them, stored them in paper envelopes in a cool, dry place, and planted them the following spring. She traded seeds with neighbors. She swapped varieties at church. She built a seed library in a shoebox that represented decades of selection for her specific soil, her specific climate, her specific family's taste. Nobody owned those seeds. Now, a handful of corporations hold patents on seed genetics, and in certain cases, replanting patented seed without a license is a violation of federal intellectual property law. Your grandmother's shoebox of tomato seeds was the most valuable thing in her pantry, and not one corporation had a claim on it. That is not an accident. That is a loss. Pattern break, friend. We are at the last one. And I told you at the beginning I was holding this one because it is the one they spent the most money making you forget. It is not a single technique. It is the whole point. Number 1. Feeding your family from your own pantry for an entire winter without buying a single item from a grocery store. Your grandmother did not have one food preservation trick. She had all 25 of them running at the same time, stacked on top of each other, feeding into each other, covering every gap the season left. The root cellar held the vegetables. The smokehouse held the meat. The crocks held the pickles and the kraut, and the lard-sealed pork. The water glass held the eggs. The wax held the cheese. The ash box, the sand crate, the honey jars, the dried corn, the salt fish, the rendered tallow, the mother vinegar, the saved seeds that started the whole cycle over again in April. Not one of those systems required electricity. Not one required a license. Not one required a trip to town. The grocery store was a convenience, not a necessity. Your grandmother could walk past it and shrug. That is what they want you to forget, neighbor. Not any one technique. The stack, the whole system running together. Because a family that can feed itself for 5 months without buying a thing is a family that cannot be controlled by a supply chain, cannot be panicked by a shortage, cannot be squeezed by a price hike, cannot be made to stand in line. And that, friend, is not survivalism. That is not doom talk. I am not selling you fear, and I am not telling you the world is ending. I am telling you your grandparents lived a life the current system does not want you to remember, because a family that remembers cannot be sold as much. That is all. Now, some of what I walked through today, the law looks at sideways depending on your county and your state. I told you where the line sits on each one. Check your own before you cross it. Do not try to do all 25, friend. Pick one, just one. This week, save the bacon grease in a tin by the stove. That is Monday. Buy a bag of coarse salt and cure a piece of pork belly. That is Saturday. Save seeds from one tomato this fall. That is 10 minutes in September. Bury a dozen eggs in a box of wood ash and check them in 3 months. That is this afternoon. 1 brick in the wall. Then next month, another one. And by this time next year, your pantry starts to look like the one your grandmother kept. Not because the world is falling apart, because the world is expensive, and she knew a cheaper way. Tell me down below, did your grandparents do any of these 25? Which one? Name it. If your grandmother kept a grease tin, a kraut crock, or a seed box, I want to hear about it. The one that gets the most replies is the one I go deep on in the next video. Your grandmother ran all 25 of these from the same kitchen, the same cellar, and the same garden. Nobody gave her a permit. Nobody inspected her crock. Nobody told her she needed a license to feed her own children. Now those skills are yours again. Do not let them die on your watch. Next time on this channel, I am going to walk you through the $1 pantry staple your great-grandmother kept in a tin above the stove that put an entire industrial food category out of business for 20 years before they found a way to make you forget it existed. Tap subscribe if you have not. There are 300 more of these buried in Eli's journal, and I mean to pull every last one of them back into daylight before I am done. Keep the old ways. They kept us.